Colin, how are you doing today?
I'm doing really well, Harry. Really well.
You're dressed very professionally. You must be doing something important these days.
I am. I've been invited to speak at a conference. I was just as surprised as you that they invited me, but there's certain standards and dress codes you gotta do when you go to these things.
Yeah, well, we must be making it to the big time because that's a perfect segue. Because believe it or not, we've got our first sponsor for the podcast. How does that sound?
I mean, I'm excited for them. It's obviously a company that we've both worked with and done a lot of things with in the past, so I'm excited. I'll let you break
Yeah.
the news on who it is.
Definitely. Well, we are now partnering with Sydecar. So we've got a little blurb here that we're going to read, and then maybe you and I can chat about them because I think this is a cool one because it's such a good fit for our audience and what we talk about. And also, you and I both use the product, I would say, quite frequently. Right? I do every one of my investments with Sidecar, and I think you do quite a few syndicates too. So let me read the blurb and then we can chat about it. Sound good?
I'm in.
All right. Attention, wannabe angels. Begin your venture capital career with Sidecar, the go-to platform for those new to managing SPVs and funds. Sidecar is on a mission to make private markets more accessible, transparent, and liquid by standardizing how investment vehicles are created and executed. Our intuitive software empowers you to launch SPVs and funds instantly, monitor funding in real time, and it offers hassle-free opportunities for early liquidity. That's always important. As you close your first deals and begin building your portfolio, Sidecar acts as your silent operating partner. We handle all back office tasks in one centralized location, allowing you to focus on deal making without the burden of managing subscription documents, tracking wires, or distributing K1s. Given the unpredictability of private markets, you need back office support that's reliable. Sidecar's responsive and proactive customer support team is always at your service, ensuring you have the stability and assistance needed to successfully navigate the complexities of managing SPVs or starting your fund. To learn more, visit Sidecar's Wannabe Angels page. That's sidecar.io/wannabe angels. And of course, if you don't want to type all that in, we will leave a link in the show notes and in our email newsletter. How does that all sound, Colin?
Sounds amazing and sounds kind of spot on to my experience with Sidecar. I'll let me talk a little bit about it, and I want to hear your experience too. But I think I looked really hard when I first got into doing syndications between platforms. There's Angelus, Carta, a number of ones out there. And I think the thing I kept coming back to was like, one, I wanted control over it. I didn't necessarily want to broadcast it to everyone out there. Um, and realistically, the cost was pretty exorbitant across the other platforms for what it was. And it just felt like there had to be a better way. And so the way I got introduced to Sidecar is I was just asking around friends, and a lawyer friend of mine was like, "You should check out this company, Sidecar." And that was how I ended up finding them. And here we are, I think 10 SPVs later, and then also building my own fund on their platform as well.
Yeah, well, I think we're sort of going to tease them in this episode, but we'll be chatting about them over the next couple months. Probably have a representative from the company on. So if there's any topics you want to learn about when it comes to SPVs or funds, or you're really kind of the ecosystem, we'll have some cool experts at our disposal over the next couple months. And then, obviously, there's no better company to partner with than one that you actually use. So really excited to work with the team at Sidecar, and I think that you hit the nail on the head. I think for me, with my investment vehicle going forward, I'm syndicating every deal from my LP and my GP commit. And so I literally have to syndicate every investment that I make. And so Sidecar was definitely, I think the most affordable option I found. And I think what I just really liked about their product is that I feel like a lot of the SPV game is like if you're Naval, and talking about these products, like you can raise millions of dollars for most people. That's not the situation. It's a grind, it's hard work, and so I think like seeing, what they charge, for example, in the low thousands of dollars compared to, close, the high end, right? Like if you're struggling to raise, 25, 30, 40,000, which I think is the more realistic, path a lot of times when you do these syndicates, you got to start somewhere. I just feel like it's more in line with like the actual experience of syndicating a deal. It's tough. It's not, I don't think anyone, we're ever going to say it's easy, but, it can be very rewarding and, sort of puts you on that right path. So I think to me, it just sort of seemed like they were a lot more in touch with kind of the everyday man or woman's experience of raising an SPV. And I think their sort of product, customer service, everything reveals that. So excited to dig in over the next few episodes.
Me too. It's going to be fun.
Awesome. Well, we're going to get into this week's episode right now. We've got a fun one. So I actually didn't want you involved in this episode, Colin. So I cut you out of it. So it's going to be me and Ben Lang. And this is super timely because he's now sort of mini famous on Twitter right now for this Notion template that he shared. So I will own up to it though. We booked him before he went viral. So I don't know if he would have said yes after he went viral, but we've got a great episode and a great guest coming. You ready?
Yeah, I'm excited, and I think our users going to benefit from the marriage advice they get from his Notion template if they go find it on Twitter.
Awesome. We'll,
So,
we'll hit him up real quick for a bonus question and see if we can get that going. So, big thanks to Sydecar for partnering with us on this episode and the next few. And without further ado, let's get going.
The last investment I made was from a cold email. The
Yeah.
person who put in the first check was someone I had known for a long time and done some deals with in the past. So it wasn't like totally out of the blue, but we had some conversations and chatted on WhatsApp a bunch. And I
Yeah.
just came out really impressed with this founder. He was a repeat founder, had done an incredible job before, was super responsive, was just
Yeah.
like clearly very, very hungry. And like, this is a cold email. So those kinds of things do happen.
So, Ben Lang has spent his life hopping between New York, Tel Aviv, and San Francisco. He's a builder, former founder, and community guy, always in multiple places at one time. Ben was an early member of the Notion team where he led community for nearly 5 years. He actively makes angel investments and advises a few select startups. And today we have the pleasure of having him join the Wannabe Angels podcast. So, Ben, how are you doing today?
Great to be here. Thanks for having me. I haven't updated that bio in quite a while, so it's funny hearing that.
No worries. I actually, I think we queued this episode up a while ago, and I was just thinking, I was like, did he send me this or did I pull this? I can't remember, but I'm gonna look at his face while I read it off and sort of see what he says, how he feels, and I think it is, it sounds like it's pretty much on point
Yeah,
ish.
totally. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we're going to dig into the details of, kind of what you've been up to and what you've got going on. And I think the impetus for this was I saw on LinkedIn that you had mentioned you wired your first angel investment of 2024. You're traveling a bit as your bio kind of implied, but luckily we able to got you on. And, I think it was like a quick post you did, but you just seemed to have like a good excitement and enthusiasm for investing and sort of what you're seeing. And so that was really kind of the, reason why I wanted to have you on. So excited to dig in.
Yeah, totally.
Awesome. Well, I love to give our audience a quick insight into your history with investing and sort of how you got started. So I've got some rapid fire questions and then we'll get into the show. Sound good?
Yeah.
All right. So how many angel investments have you made to date?
I think probably between 50 and 60.
Nice. How many angel investments have you made this year or do you plan to make this year?
This year, I think maybe two or three so far, and hoping to make probably 10 to 15.
Cool. All right. So you got some work to do. What's your average check size?
I mostly do 100K checks now. I raised a bit of money, so I have a vehicle that I invest out of now. I used to do 10K checks before that when I was investing
Mhm.
personally, but now I'm trying to kind of stick with these larger checks.
Cool. Well, we'll definitely ask about that. And what type of startups do you look for and at what stage?
So I'm trying to do pre-seed and seed, but really leaning in more like as early as possible, as much pre-seed as I can, trying
Mhm.
to get into the first round of funding when as much as possible. I do seed as well, slightly later, and very very people driven.
Yeah. So yeah, let's dive in there on the community side. You mentioned in your bio a lot about community. Explain what is community for maybe someone who doesn't know, or what's your definition of community?
Yeah, I think for me, community is just bringing together people around shared interests and values. And
Hmm.
so I've done that at Notion. I've done that with other companies before as well. It kind of, it's kind of broad, so it ties into a whole bunch of things on the marketing side.
Yeah.
But I also pretty actively do a bunch of things in the community world personally, and
Hmm.
and those kind of are all very helpful on the angel investing front. So that's really where a lot of my deal flow comes from.
Very cool. What's a good real life or tangible example of something that you're working on or have worked on in the community space?
Yeah, so I think right now something I'm spending a bunch of time on is this thing called Next Play. So it's
Hmm.
nextplay.so, and So I've been hosting these dinners and gatherings for quite a few years now for people who are exploring what's next. So
Hmm.
people who are openly or secretly thinking about starting something, joining something, they're confused. Types of people that come to these are like repeat founders who sold their last companies and like want to start something but have no idea what, or
Hmm.
engineers who want to leave, they work at some hot startup or large company and they want to leave and start something and they, or they want to join
Yeah.
something and they're not sure what. And kind of people are just like exploring and thinking about what comes next. It's a really hard phase and also, not so easy to talk
Yeah.
about because you can't really be open. And so we try to create like an environment for people to be open about it. We'll do smaller ones with like 10 people. We'll do some larger ones with 20, 25 people. And through that, I've just been able to meet like really incredible people who are starting things, joining things. It's great because I get to meet, future founders. I get to meet people
Yeah.
who want to join companies that I've invested in. And to me, that's a great example of community, just bringing together around shared interests
Yeah.
and shared values.
Yeah, so it's definitely a super cool and unique idea. Do you sort of feel like what do you think kind of gives you your edge here? Is it because it's tough to organize? It's a lot easier to do like a webinar or Zoom, that 14 people show up to and, kind of doing in person, you got to get commitment. And what do you think kind of makes these events you do stand out? And it seems like you're having good success. And I'm on the website now. We'll leave a link in the show notes. I don't know if people can get involved or if it's invite only, but maybe you can dive in the details there.
Yeah, so people apply, and we try to be really thoughtful about curating and
Hmm.
keeping the bar really high. So not everyone who applies we invite, and I think that's just how we kind of create a valuable and helpful environment for the people that come. So really, the work that I'm doing is just the curation,
Got
making
it.
sure we're bringing the right people. And now what I'm really excited about is, so I've been hosting these in a couple cities myself now, but I've
Hmm.
found a few hosts in different cities who are going to be organizing these events with like the same brand, same
Hmm.
playbook, same database of people, and that way I don't have to
Yeah,
travel everywhere. I think it's a lot more scalable. So now we're working on getting these going in London, and Austin, and
very
Boston,
cool.
and in Miami, and a couple other places. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Do you see this as a business for you, or is it more of a kind of lead gen and flow for your angel investments?
Yeah, it's definitely not a business. There's no money coming into it. The actual gatherings they're always sponsored by a VC and that VC will end up joining. So we've partnered with a bunch of really great VCs
Oh,
to
that's
to make
cool.
it happen over the years. For me, I mean, I try not to look at it as like a lead magnet. I honestly just really enjoy doing it. And I think it's something that's really
Yeah.
valuable for people, and I get a lot of, I just get a lot out of it personally. And, I've met great friends through it over the
Yeah.
years. And I mean, I definitely have made some investments through it as well. But it's not the only reason I'm doing it.
For sure. No, I think that's fair. It's sometimes a little callous to say that, I'm putting these dinners together for lead gen, right? Maybe that's not the best, marketing term, right? I'm sure you could phrase it better. But I think the best kind of endeavors in life hit on a few different areas, like your passion for community, your passion for investing. And obviously, we all need to live and make money and, pay the bills, right? So that, may not be anywhere near 100% of the reason. But if you can kind of squirrel that in, like to me, I guess like the best things in life, it's like, are part of my business and it's something I love and I'm helping people, right? If I can kind of tap all those three, it's kind of a cool thing. And it seems like events and gatherings are kind of in right now. What do you think about that in 2024?
Yeah, I think there was a lack of it during COVID, and I think people are
Yeah.
definitely craving being together in person. Being online, being on Zoom is just not the same. I think people realize that. People got very burnt out from events.
Yeah.
I can't recall last time I went to like an online event. It's just not enjoyable for me personally, and so I understand why there's like kind of a desire for more in person.
For sure. Are there other people that you consistently work with or respect or look up to, either kind of in this events and small gathering space or, just kind of community at large?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, no, there definitely are. I would say someone we worked with at Notion who was really incredible was a woman named Erica Cool, who had
Hmm.
started and run Salesforce's community for 15 years, and Trailblazers and their
Yeah.
annual conference in San Francisco. And
Oh,
she
yeah, for
she was
sure.
just very, very inspiring, and I learned a lot from her. There's definitely others, but she was
Yeah.
like definitely. she's top of mind when I think about this.
Very cool. Yeah, I think you and I are both active on Twitter, and I feel like on a smaller scale, there's a lot of these folks, that are hosting little curated, omakase dinners for founders and others throwing big events and parties. I just played golf with a buddy here in LA, Morgan Barrett. He runs a tech breakfast club, so there's kind of these cool little angles and edges. So yeah, we may be, maybe you'll get a few people like myself included hitting you up to talk about these satellite events because this sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I'm all for folks kind of finding their niche and just bringing people together. I think it's
Nice.
really great.
Very cool. Well, let's pivot a little bit to your investments and fund because, I will say, I mentioned you off air when I was reading, the questions we sent you ahead of time. I was like, whoa, 100K checks, man, this guy must be rich. And so it's funny that you mentioned your fund. So talk a little bit about that initial angel investing journey, and then sort of maybe we can get into the details and mechanics of your fund or your investment vehicle.
Yeah, yeah. So I started probably I think 5.5 years ago, maybe 6 years
Hmm.
ago, and the way I started was actually I met a founder who was a pretty active angel investor, and he was pretty busy running his company, but wanted to be
Hmm.
angel investing more and kind of had the capacity to be the resources to be investing more.
Yeah.
So he had worked with someone for a year who was helping him with like sourcing and just like outbound and kind of keeping track of things and getting deals through the door just because he was so busy. And that person ended up leaving. And so we just kind of spent some time together
Hmm.
and at some point just decided that I would kind of continue doing that. And so I spent probably a year and a half, maybe 2 years doing that with him. And we maybe did 20 or so deals together throughout that time. And all of his capital, and it was really great because I just got to like learn a lot, just the ins and outs of
Yeah.
what this world looked like. I didn't have to risk my money, which was really helpful at that time. I got to see kind of how his thinking process behind making investments. And also he just, he was also, well known in the industry, and so he had a lot of
Yeah.
access, and so it was
Got it.
helpful to just get a foot in the door that way.
Well, you know what's interesting? I don't think I've ever heard of someone kind of getting their foot in the door that way, but I feel like it might be one of the best, ideas I've heard. People are like, oh, invest in a bunch of syndicates or, make them small and, and it's like, oh, that's a lot, you're spending your own money. And so it sounds like you found a founder. I don't know if you can share who it was, but, you found a founder who sort of was well respected in the industry. So I'm guessing a lot of people were coming to them with sort of the best and early deals because they were an industry expert and someone you want on the cap table. And then I'm sure they had some good exit or secondary or something where they had real capital to sort of go and invest, and maybe they could even help a little, and but just didn't have the time because they're busy running the day to day of the company. So it sort of feels like, if I'm someone looking to get in, like I want to find, that's like a good little formula to look for someone like that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I actually, when people ask me how to break into angel investing, I always tell them this is
Yeah.
the best way to do it. I think it's a win-win. It helps. I mean, it's incredible for you like to break in. It can also be incredible for the founder, operator, whoever it is who,
Yeah.
has this time crunch. So I would certainly recommend folks try that.
For sure. How are you compensated for this? Was it kind of cash or was it a little bit of carry or a mix of two?
Yeah, yeah. So I got like a little bit of carry in the deals that we did together. So it was
Okay.
I still had a full-time job when I was doing that, and this was more of for me it was more of like
Yeah.
what I would consider like an apprenticeship,
Yeah,
where
for
I
sure.
was more so just optimizing for learning, and I think in the long run I benefited a lot from doing this. I probably
Yeah,
wouldn't be angel
definitely.
investing at all today if I hadn't done this.
Definitely. Well, I sort of settled on a very similar structure for my fund where we do 25K angel checks. And I actually just hired sort of what I'm calling, an associate or intern. He's in college and, kind of very similar profile. He's got 5, 10, 15 hours a week to kind of do this stuff on the side. So I definitely like that. And I'm kind of similar. I might not be as legit as this founder you worked for, but, I've got a lot of stuff going on. So it's fun to have a little help in that situation. So let's talk about I think you referred to it as an investment vehicle. So what are you doing now when it comes to your investments?
Yeah, so for a while after I stopped working with this founder, I
Hmm.
spent time just doing my own angel investing. I was doing, 10, 15K checks, pretty small. And
Yeah.
I did that for a while, and at a certain point well, I realized I wanted to kind of like take it to the next level, and also, at a certain point I was pretty active and just realized it wasn't feasible to do this forever. So
Do you
so
mean because
I
you were running out of money or?
Yeah, well, yeah. Meaning like liquidity wise, it
Yeah.
wasn't the smartest thing
Well,
to
because
just
I
keep
will
doing
say, like
indefinitely.
I think that's one thing we've seen over and over. I was similar. I was doing 10 to 15 and sometimes more, 25K LP type checks. And it doesn't seem like a lot. I mean, it is a lot, but it doesn't seem like a lot. But, you're doing 5 to 10 a year and then, 7 to 12 years of
Yeah.
no returns and it can add up, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, it definitely adds up. So yeah, so at some point I decided to just raise some outside money. I set up a fund on Angel List and brought together some LPs, some founders, investors that I was friends with, and I don't really have a name for it. I've never actually shared it. So I at some point I will, but until now I haven't really shared it anywhere, and I don't even know if I'm going to come up with a name for it or not.
Hmm.
I've always kind of liked the idea of just investing, as a person.
Yeah.
I think people really like the idea of, having a person with them versus like some fund name.
Yeah.
So that's why I've never really like put so much effort into like coming up with a name and kind of going
Yeah.
down that path that I feel like a lot of investors
Branding
spend a lot
it
of,
and marketing
yeah,
it and
it just always felt very unnecessary to me.
Hmm. I kind of like that. I was in a similar situation. I've got a 500K fund and one LP, right? So it's not a real fund, and technically it's just a side letter. And I think I sort of in my Google Doc, I just named it. Oh, this is my RSG fund. Here's how I'm investing, but because after my business. But I kind of like that as investing as a person. I feel like that's because that's really what they're getting in this situation. And I don't know, do you kind of consider this like a real fund, or do you sort of think of it as like, hey, I'm investing, sort of doing what I was doing, but just with other people's money now? Like, how do you kind of, if you had to define it, how would you define it?
Yeah, I mean, I do feel like I'm still doing what I was doing before, just larger check sizes. I am obviously responsible for other folks' money, and
Hmm.
I know at the end of the day, there's a lot of risk with angel investing, and
Yeah.
it's impossible to guarantee, good returns. But obviously, I feel a sense of responsibility and want to make sure I do the best possible, and keep in touch with like the folks
Yeah.
the LPs that gave me money and share updates, and I think that's all really important.
Yeah. Well, I guess one thing
Yeah.
I've been thinking about lately is sort of for folks that are kind of in this phase where, on one end of the spectrum, maybe if you kind of go and raise some vehicle, let's say you have one LP, 500K or $1 million, and they're just like, they know you, they love you, they trust you, they give you the money and let you do your thing. That might be like kind of a best case, sort of like high ROI scenario, right? So not a ton of updates, or if you do update, you grab coffee or have a phone call periodically with them. And then, as you go down the spectrum, right? Like on the other end of the spectrum is like, the whole song and dance you have to do when you're raising a fund, like, oh, look at our returns and you look how awesome, you know what I mean? And hyping up and, kind of doing like I was just at an LP day, right? And like kind of that. And I'm like sitting to myself, like, okay, I don't know, like it's a lot of like song and dance, I guess you would say. I don't know. Where do you think you are on that spectrum? And where do you think is like kind of maybe the optimal point? Like, I don't know, I'm kind of leaning more like towards the high ROI, find one or two or three really good LPs who really know you and trust you if you can.
Yeah, I mean, there's a balance of like how much money do you need to raise, and do you need to go
Yeah.
out and find more LPs, and if you have the ability to just kind of have less folks and keep in touch with them more consistently and in more efficient ways, I think that's great. It's just everyone has kind of like a different setup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I'm curious to get your point of view on that because like I think people usually either angel invest or kind of raise a fund, right? And there aren't a lot of people like in between. I don't know if you think of yourself as being in between, but like
Yeah.
I'm curious, like maybe that in between is like a good spot to be. Usually if no one's doing anything, it's either a really good idea or a bad idea. And I'm not sure yet. So I'm trying to figure that out and using your help.
Yeah. I think I would consider myself like in between
Mhm.
because, well, I don't even really have like I don't have a name for the fund, right?
Yeah.
I just call it my name.
Yeah. But it is technically
So
a fund because it's on Angel List and,
right, right. Technically, just because there's no other real way to set it up, or
yeah.
no easy way to set it up outside of that. So yeah, I mean, I guess, my hope is like in that I'm just kind of optimizing as much as possible to make great investments
Yeah.
and doing what I can to, do the best possible
Yeah.
investments. Like I think that's the most important thing at the end of the day. Whether
Very
or not
cool.
I go out and raise more money later on, or that I have no idea.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Well, for the final part of the show, I want to dig in and sort of find out what you're actually excited about and, sort of investing in going forward. Are there any themes? We're here sort of still at the beginning of 2024-ish. What are you sort of like most excited about, like theme-wise, company-wise, space-wise, like, one or two things that like get you up every day?
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone's saying it, but AI, of course,
AI.
is in
Okay,
every
no
pitch.
worries.
So
Yeah, it is
I
in
think
every
it's
pitch right
in
now.
yeah. So I don't even know if it's like fair to say that because it's really just every pitch out there. I'm less like thematic and more like people driven. I
Hmm.
get much more excited about meeting incredible founders and people who I really just want to back. And that's kind of really what I look for. I also kind of, I do like exploring like products, things that I'm using myself, spaces like, areas that I'm kind of looking for better
Yeah.
products.
Hmm.
Some like the productivity that tools that I've invested in the past, maybe like kind of, have kind of come from that. But
Hmm.
I'm not really out there thinking about like, by vertical or space too much. I just don't think for like for pre-seed, I just don't think it's so helpful because you don't really you could invest in some pre-seed company that just
Yeah.
changes like their domain and everything within a
Yeah.
year. So it's much more about like the founders. Are
Hmm.
they, are they going to figure this out? And do they seem like people are going to want to work on something, for the next 10 years and obsessed about it?
Yeah. Well, so let's start with founders because I think we hear that refrain over and over, find the best people, the best founders. They're so they're so passionate, right? And all that. Like, I guess to me, it's kind of easy when you get a founder, a pitch, you know them, you've worked with them forever, you've seen them in action, you've seen them start a company, they come to you, like I got, early. It's like, okay, that's pretty easy. Yes, a lot of the time, right? If you have that like special insight. What about for the people who maybe aren't in your network, right? Like, what do you think? Like, have you invested in many people who maybe someone else is here telling you like, oh my God, these founders are great? Or like, how do you think about like, how do you kind of determine if you don't know them that well?
Yeah, I definitely will lean on input from other investors or people that I trust, or maybe folks that I've known for a while. I find
Hmm.
that to be pretty helpful. But also, I think sometimes, even like the last investment I made was from a cold email. The
Yeah. Hmm.
person who put in the first check was someone I had known for a long time and done some deals with in the past. So it wasn't like totally out of the blue, but we had some conversations and chatted on WhatsApp a bunch, and I
Yeah.
just came out really impressed with this founder. He was a repeat founder, had done an incredible job before, was super responsive, was just
Yeah.
like clearly very, very hungry. And like, this is a cold email. So those kinds of things do happen. Of
Yeah.
course, like it is a lot easier when it is a founder that, you've known for 10 years and, you've seen them, you've seen what they can do. But, I try not to like limit myself just to that.
Yeah. Well, I think I like that. I think one of the things that I sort of look for, I kind of think of it as like if I get someone cold pitch or cold email or get intro to a founder, like I kind of look for multiple data points, right? Like, hey, okay, I meet them, I take the call, I ping them on a Monday on a holiday, see if they reply. You know what I mean? Like I see if they're sending updates or, I kind of want to like gather a little data over like 1, 2, 3 months so I can sort of like get to know them, even if they say they're going to do something, do they follow through? And even if not, that's totally okay. Do they have like a good excuse why they didn't follow through? What do you think about like, I mean, obviously, if you have the time to do that, it's great, but like, how do you kind of get to know founders quickly?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I I think, I try to just have kind of an ongoing conversation. So I
Yeah.
find like texting to be pretty helpful
Yeah. I
and
like the WhatsApp
and
texting idea.
yeah, I think like, just having like a random Zoom conversation can be a little tough to get an idea of
Yeah.
like who they are. Um, so, just like talking a bunch, not making a decision within like a day or two, and really maybe spending like some time getting to know them a bit better. I, at the end of the day, like there's a limit to what you're able to do. I think kind of
Yeah.
pairing that with like maybe mutual friends, like doing some references. That company I
Yeah.
spoke, like I mentioned before, like I did reach out about the founder to a few other people who knew this person and asked them like, hey, do you know this person?
Hmm.
Did you like what do you think of them? And getting some like references can also be really helpful. So, just doing like the most you can, I think on that front is it can be pretty helpful to get like a a good picture.
Yeah, no, I like that. So you also mentioned exploring products and things that you use yourself. So I just invested in a golf startup. I'm a big golfer, so I'm guilty of that one in a good or bad way. Do you think it's a good idea, bad idea? I mean, obviously you're doing it, so I don't think you think it's a bad idea, but do you think it's like optimizes for best returns, or why do you, kind of like invest in stuff that you like or use?
Yeah, I no, I mean, I think it's a great idea. I think, look, I think if it's something that if it's an area that you're passionate about or that you know really well, like you'll just have, more insights than maybe other markets or other areas. Obviously you want to like give it fair judgment and not like
Hmm.
have it clouded by your own like personal feelings. But I think I've made some pretty like solid investments, through that and I definitely do recommend folks like start with that. Versus like just some random,
Yeah.
vertical that you just know nothing about. I think that's actually a lot harder to like get an understanding of like what is going on here. What should I be investing in?
Yeah. Very cool. Do you think now is a good time to angel invest?
I think that was a great time. I think 2021 was a lot harder because there was like
Hmm.
just 2022 like there was just so much competition. Deals closed so fast. It
Yeah.
was valuations were crazy. Now like there's less of that, more reasonable time frames. I think it's a really good time to get started with
Yeah.
angel investing.
Yeah, I guess if you think about, especially if you're on the earlier, sort of the fresher side, like the things that we just talked about, getting to know a founder a little bit, sort of, coming in, you probably have a smaller check, right? So obviously, if they're raising a ton of money, they care less about the small check. So it does seem like in that context, now is kind of a good time to start, right? Because there's like good opportunity for that typical profile of a new angel investor.
Yeah, totally. And also like technology is not stopping, it's only accelerating.
Yeah.
And there's just like
I guess that
there's
sort of
there's no
also leads me.
time.
Yeah, is there
Yeah.
ever a bad time to angel invest though?
Exactly. Yeah. I think if you're like as long as you're like an optimistic person,
Yeah.
bullish on the future, then it's never a bad time. And I think there's good reasons to be optimistic because like technology is always changing and there's always going to be like we're no no one's gonna like there's never gonna be like a standstill moment.
Yeah.
So it's always a good time to be investing in technology.
Yeah. The other thing I noticed in your bio, you said that you do a little advising. How do you kind of balance the advising versus investing? Is there a crossover there, or kind of how do you handle the two lanes? I assume you mean advising for equity, they'll give you options or shares if they're early, or obviously investing, you're giving them cash. How do you sort of look at the two?
Yeah, I've done a few of those. The advising for me has just meant more like hands-on work. And
Hmm.
sometimes it can be a mix of like putting in money and, as an investment, as well as like getting more equity and some sort of like advisory shares. As an investor, I also try to be, as hands-on and helpful as possible. Obviously,
Yeah.
as an angel, I'm not the most active, as much as like maybe a full-time VC would be, who
Hmm.
is putting in much larger checks. So I think advisory opportunities are just like a good way to like kind of get more hands-on and be on the ground like kind of working on stuff in Notion docs and
Yeah.
in meetings and kind of building together a bit more. And I think it's fun just because like I really enjoy that and I like
Yeah.
kind of being on the ground as well.
What do you think an angel investor should sort of offer? If they're on the phone with a founder and obviously the founder's kind of pitching you because you're giving them money, but sometimes you kind of need to pitch them. Like like, is there anything I shouldn't, this is too much to offer, or you should it just be here's my check and I'll try to be helpful. Like, what do you think an angel and a typical angel investor should offer to a founder?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really depends on like your background and kind of
Hmm.
what what you kind of have on your plate. I do think founders do appreciate kind of something beyond just like the capital. So if
Yeah.
it's if it's an audience, if it's customer introductions, if it's hiring opportunities, I think those are all great. I mean, honestly, what I always do is I just kind of keep an eye out for like any investor updates. A lot
Yeah.
of great companies will send out monthly investor updates, and they'll have a section in there with like their asks. And even if you can't help out with any of them, just like responding and saying like, "Hey, this is great. Like, keep up the great work." I think founders really appreciate that. Just like being there and showing that you're reading their updates, and if you can occasionally help out with something, that's great. If
Yeah.
not, it's fine.
Very cool. I think that's one of the things that I delineate. I'm an advisor for 20, maybe 20 companies, more for equity and then invest in a bunch of others. And I think one of the things I delineate is like on the investment side, like I'm not promising anything. It's like I'm gonna try and help. I'm gonna be involved. I'm gonna be there. But like on the advisor side, it's like, no, here are the things I'm going to do. You know what I mean? Or like here are the areas where I can help. But obviously, it is a little tricky because it goes from advisor, you're getting, options or shares to investing. You're giving them money to kind of do a little bit of the same thing. So it's always an interesting interplay, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean that breakdown makes a lot of sense.
Very cool. Well, Ben, I really enjoyed chatting with you and hearing about everything that you're up to. Is there any final words that you want to leave with our audience? Anything we didn't get to opine on, or you want to just tell them where they can follow you and find all your work?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on Twitter, I'm on LinkedIn. Just search my name, Ben Lang. I'm trying to build out my newsletter, so feel free to join my newsletter,
I think I
and
just
of course
accepted an invite to that on LinkedIn, so I'm in.
great, great.
So
Thanks
Twitter,
for having me on.
LinkedIn. Yeah, definitely. And then we'll also mention the next play
Yeah,
.so. And I guess if there's any founders out there, it sounds like you might have taken a cold email or two in the past. What's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
yeah. I mean, finding my email or DMing me on Twitter or LinkedIn, like totally happy to do that.
All right, we'll
Always
leave
happy,
it
always
as
happy to hear from
that's the
founders.
first challenge right there for anyone listening.
Exactly. It's not hard to find.
Sounds good, Ben. Appreciate it. Take care.
Cool. Thank you.